From Interfaith Alliance, this is State of Belief Radio. I'm your host, Reverend Welton Gaddy. Dr. Frank Newport has been leading the Gallup poll as editor-in-chief since 1991. A prolific writer and commentator, he's just published his latest book titled God is Alive and Well, The Future of Religion in America. And I am very pleased to welcome Dr. Newport to State of Belief Radio. Welcome.
My pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's start right out with the premise of your title. What leads you to say God is alive and well?
Well, I think that what led me to believe that were the data. We collect now, and have been for 5 years, over 300,000 interviews a year where we ask people about their religion and religiosity. And Gallup has been asking in some other ways these same questions going back to the 1940s and 50s. So we have a lot of data, and the data simply show that the significant majority of Americans remain religious, despite what might have been said or heard to the contrary. Specifically, in terms of belief in God, we continue to have over 90% of Americans who say yes when we ask them that question. It's really not that much different, as I say in the beginning chapter of the book, than when Gallup asked people back in 1944 if they believed in God. So although there have been some changes, the religion doesn't stand still in America. It's morphing, changing, moving. Nevertheless, I think we in this country remain a quite religious people.
I don't have to tell you, rightly or wrongly, your book has often been described in the press as contrarian, sort of challenging what many see as the conventional wisdom that religion is on the decline in this country. My question is, are you dealing with a difference in what you've observed, or is it more that your interpretation of what you observe is different from others?
Well, it may be some of both. I can give you an example. One of the trends in data which is often cited by those who say this is a secularizing country is the rise in the nuns, as we call it, N-O-N-E-S. That's the percent of Americans who, in response to a survey question, which asks, what is your religion? Are you Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, Mormon, something else? Say none of the above. And it is absolutely true. That's risen. Back in the 50s, we had in some surveys less than 1% who said they didn't have a religion. Everybody else would say, I'm Catholic, I'm Jewish, I'm Baptist, I'm Presbyterian, and so forth. And now we have in our latest compilation of over 300,000 interviews, 17.8%, rounding to 18% of Americans who, in answer to that question, don't give a religion. So that's given rise to a lot of people saying, look at the secularizing trend. But when you really look at the data carefully, for one thing, the data show that inside that group of nuns are people who still believe in God, still have an interest in religion, and tell us that they may be religious in the future. Second, that percentage is actually leveling off now, at least in our data. It's not continuing to increase. And third, when we look at a lot of other indicators in our data, we don't see that kind of change. The percent who believe in God, actually church attendance, hasn't really changed that much over the last several decades. So I'm both looking at data and interpreting data to say, although things are changing, I don't want to say everything's standing still, that the country remains quite religious.
Frank, this is just a little bit maybe outside your polling data, though I know that you've got a lot of relevant material, but there are a lot of people who are not talking about themselves as religious people or organized religious people, but as people of spirituality. It's true, isn't it, that among those who see themselves as spiritual rather than religious, there's still a belief in God?
That's right. And you put your finger on something that certainly I highlighted in the book that I wrote, which is that Americans are changing how they're addressing their, we might call it, religious impulse. We are becoming more of an unbranded country in terms of religion. So the rise in the nuns to some degree represents this change where people no longer say identify with an organized religion. We all know when we study religious trends that there are more Americans who attend non-denominational or Bible churches or churches that are very loosely affiliated with denominations. In the Protestant sector, there's big growth there. Even in our data, we have more and more Americans who may end up saying they're Christian, but they no longer say Presbyterian or Episcopalian. They're much vaguer in how they give their religion.
Mm-hmm.
So there's clearly been an increase in the way people view their religiosity, and some of that comes through in some surveys, not ours necessarily, but in some where people say, well, I may not be classically religious, but I am spiritual in some way, and seeking some type of outlet for this impulse.
You are one of the few voices that speaks loudly now in saying that Americans are likely to increasingly see religion as being good for them. Is that based on data, or is that based on hope or hunch, or what is that?
Oh, no, that's based on a hardcore look at the data, and it's not what people say. We actually look at the correlations in the data. We looked in depth at over 700,000 interviews where we had asked people a bunch of questions about your well-being. Are you happy? Were you angry yesterday? Were you stressed yesterday? Did you have a positive experience yesterday? Rate your own life. Rate your health. And independently of that, in the same survey, we had asked people about their religion. So we were able to correlate the two and put it through some statistical modeling, and lo and behold, we found there is a statistically significant relationship. Controlling for demographic variables, people who are more religious, the way we categorize it, have higher well-being and better health. Mm-hmm. And then I looked at the data. There are a lot of studies out there which show the same correlation. I think there's no question among serious researchers that religious people have higher happiness and well-being and to some degree higher health. The contention has come about causality. It's been harder to say that becoming more religious leads to the better well-being. Some people say, well, maybe people who are happier choose to be religious, causality the other way around. Mm-hmm. But some recent research suggests there really is a causal pattern there between religion and well-being. So I think that's a very, very profound finding in the data.
Would you talk a little about the future of religion in America as you see it, and the role that religion's going to play in our culture and politics going forward?
Well, I think it'll still be very prominent. Some people say, we're going to be a secularizing country, and like Europe, or some countries in Europe, there's still some very religious countries in Europe, but like some in Europe where religion's less important. But there are a number of indicators in the data that show religion's still very vibrant. And of course, if you look around the world, you can see how important religion is. In many countries, battles are being fought, people killed, huge social movements are all based in the name of religion. So it's clear that religion's a potent force in humanity around the world, and I see it important here in the U.S. A number of reasons I go over in the book for this. First of all, the aging population. The baby boomers are going to double in size. The 65-plus population will double in size as the baby boomers move to be 65 to 85 in the next 20 years, and that's the most religious age point of our entire age spectrum. So I suspect that these huge baby boomers are going to be seeking more religion as they get older, and that's going to increase the religiousness of the country. I think that the well-being data may be better known, and people will recognize that being religious is actually good for them. We see migration to more religious rather than less religious states, and that may help increase religiousness. The Hispanic population is going to increase, and Hispanics on average are more religious than non-Hispanics, so that may affect the basic religiousness. And I think in terms of politics, religion is going to be a very important factor. To date, highly religious white Americans have been very Republican in their political orientation, but I see some signs that the Democrats may begin to contest that, and so the religious voter will become a more valuable voter in the political arena in the years ahead.
Well, I certainly don't have to tell you this. You know it and document it, I'm sure, that not only does religion influence the nation and what goes on in it, but what goes on in the nation also influences religion. And I'm wondering about the conflicts in our nation and what you see them doing to religion, conflicts over religious liberty, personal conscience, sometimes even attacks on faith. What kind of toll is that taking on the vitality of religion?
Well, that's a very good point. It's hard to document. exactly in the data what toll it has. One way we look at it is just the basic trends, and we note the things I've talked about, how religion continues to be vibrant in there. Attacks on religion sometimes can be positive, or attacks on any group, because it increases solidarity and what have you, so it's possible those kind of things could be positive rather than negative. But in a broader sense, I would say one pattern that's affecting religion is the general tendency in America for us to become less affiliated with a lot of things. With the rise of the internet and the ability of people to get information on their own, we're more likely to be doing things kind of independently and in our own way than we used to be. And I think that's spilling over into religion as well. That's one of the reasons we find people forming their own congregations or meeting in people's living rooms or starting churches out of storefronts or unused school buildings, because they're just kind of doing it their own way rather than simply saying, like in Spain, for example, if you're religious, you're going to be Catholic, because that's the huge percent of the population. So I think we have a lot of this change in the way Americans are in general is filtering over to how religion manifests itself as well.
One other question, Dr. Newport. I hear people say a lot, I've actually said it myself, that our nation is deeply divided in many ways. We certainly know that we're divided politically. Are we as divided religiously as we are politically?
Well, my answer to that is the two are correlated. And yes, it is true that the division in religion is correlated with the division in politics. I mentioned that earlier. Highly religious Americans are fairly strongly likely to be politically conservative and to vote for and affiliate with the Republican Party. In fact, sometimes the data are amazing. You look at the exit polls from last November's presidential election, and those who told exit pollers they attended church weekly overwhelmingly voted for Romney. And those who said they didn't attend church overwhelmingly voted for Obama. It's just very evident in the data, this kind of division. So, yes, we are divided on both dimensions, and they're correlated with each other. I think that may change, as I mentioned. I think Democrats may come around and say, we don't want to just abandon the highly religious voter to the Republican Party, and we're going to come after them in some different ways. As one example, the Republican affinity with highly religious people has been in some part developed on family value issues, abortion and same-sex marriage. But the Democrats may come after highly religious people and say, your principles of religion actually should move you more in the direction of our democratic views on equality or compassion or things like that. And I think they could make that argument in the future. So I think maybe those divisions between religion and politics that are so related may break down some in the years ahead.
Well, it's a great conversation, and you obviously know the data backwards and forwards and are able to interpret its meaning in a very scholarly way. Frank Newport is the longtime editor-in-chief at Gallup Polls. His latest book, write it down if you haven't heard about it, his latest book is God is Alive and Well, The Future of Religion in America. Dr. Newport, it's a fascinating conversation to have with you, and I really thank you for coming to talk with us today on State of Belief Radio.
Well, thank you, and it was my pleasure to be with you.